Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Now, I always ask you to grab that notepad and that pen to take notes, but I've got some good news today. I'm going to endeavor to give you a link so that you can download an attachment with PDF of some of the notes that we go through today. So you won't have to write down everything we go through. We're going to go through a lot of information. But you still should have that notepad and that pen handy because you want to jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today. I'm going to give you some ideas. I'm going to challenge what you're currently doing in your business, and you'll come away with at least one thing that you can implement. I promise you that will be useful and will improve the value of your business. Now, today I want to talk to you about another form of waste, and that is something I've observed time and time again where people fail to repurpose, to recycle, to reuse those creative assets that they have. So the content that you produce. And what we'll do is I will put up on the screen sort of categories of the various types of content assets that you have. And then I will give you a whole list of ideas of where you can repurpose this, where you can reuse this, and where you can recycle this. Now, we've talked in other videos before about the great danger of waste, as the Japanese like to call it muda. And I would, I guess, frame this through the lens of, or I would categorize this as inventory. So your creative assets, that content which you have taken the time to create, becomes an inventory, a dormant asset, something that isn't being used to its fullest potential. And as you know, we always want to leverage our resources. We want to leverage them to our maximum potential so that we can get the greatest return on our investments of those assets, of those resources. So think about this as we go through this. How much time has been spent going into creating these things? So content creation. You create these assets, and do you use them in one area? Are there other areas? Perhaps you're like, oh, no, we use things in many, many areas. Well, today I'm going to give you a whole bunch of ideas, and then you can brainstorm them yourselves, and you can sort of determine where you are not making full use of your creative assets, where they are lying dormant and very wasteful. So we'll frame it, I guess, through the lens of the inventory form of muda. And you never want somebody to have to rework something. You don't want to have somebody start over. And these assets, I find, what I observe in business time and again, is that people take the time to put together some of these things, and then they're on another project. It's probably not the very next thing they do. It may be a few days later, it could be a few months, could even be a few years later, and they're reworking the same thing. They're putting in the effort. They're reinventing the wheel, so to speak. That's not the right metaphor because that seems to imply maybe they're doing something different. Maybe they're doing the exact thing for the same objective they're trying to accomplish, but they have forgotten or misplaced or whatever it may be. They're just negligent in repurposing, reusing, recycling all that effort that they put in at one time in the past. So that's what we're going to go through today. I'll pull the notes up on the screen and I'll try to comment. I won't be able to comment on each and every thing because as a brainstorm, then the video will be far too long. But as we go through it, try to think in your organization. That's the purpose here. In your business, in your organization, which of these assets do you have, these asset categories, this content? Which of these have you spent the time to actually create? And then where are you using them? As we go through those areas where you can use them and where you can repurpose them, I'm positive you're going to get some great ideas of like, oh yeah, I never thought to use it in that way. I can use that in this way as well and add value. Remember, it's all about adding value. All right, so let's pull it up on the screen. Let's not scream. Let's pull it up on the screen and go through this together. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the various types of assets. I'm calling them content assets, but you could think of these as creative assets. Things that you've taken the time to create, to put together, and these are the various categories. And I'm entirely sure that I've missed some of them, but let's go through the ones I've put up here and then you can determine whether you have additional ones that you should brainstorm and add as part of your exercise, as part of your homework. All right, the first one I have up here is your logo. You've taken some time, or someone's taken some time to put together a logo for you. And if not, if there are some forms of creative assets that I put up here that you don't have, you may explore and think, I wonder why some businesses make use of that and we don't. Is there a way that I can make use of that and create value for my products or services? Again, we have slogans. And with slogans, I would add that you can have sonic logos as well. So you can have audible logos and slogans and things that you use. Also designs. You've taken some time to put together some designs. I'll get more into detail of how these are going to be used in a little bit here. Themes. What sort of themes are you using in your marketing messages and in your communications with your various stakeholders? Templates. Copy, which is just the word that we use for text or written works. So you have copy that you're using in a whole bunch of your various marketing, digital, and so on. Images, of course. Music and audio assets. Video assets. Animations that you may have created. Memes, and you've taken the time to put together maybe some memes as a form of some sort of communication. In some way you are using that meme to communicate with a stakeholder. Could be a staff member, could be your customer. Another category is stakeholder feedback. So that's an asset. Anytime you get feedback from a stakeholder, and those stakeholders, remember, those can be your customers, of course, but it could also be your team members, your business partners, your vendors. Any kind of feedback that you're getting from stakeholders in your business, that's an asset. You don't want to squander that. And we're talking today about not just squandering it, but using it optimally, leveraging it to its greatest potential. What about word tracks or scripts you've taken the time to write out? Are you using those in multiple areas? Prototypes. You've taken a long time to create some sort of prototype of a product or service, and how are you using that? In one simple place, in one instance are you using that, or are you using that time and again to make maximal leverage, best use of that prototype? Also, demonstration tools that you may use in some sort of presentation. What about cutaways, models, these types of things that you use? I've sat in on presentations where there were some really compelling tools that people used to demonstrate their product or service and to communicate the benefits of it through a visual medium. It may have been a model or a cutaway, something like that, or a cross section of their product so you could see the quality that went in. And I often wonder, are you using this in all sorts of locations, in all different forms of communications, or did you use that just for this presentation? Diagrams is another one, and flow charts. So those are the ones that I've put together here. These are creative assets that you've taken the time to put together. Now let's look at the various places that you should consider repurposing these things. Some of these you're going to see and you'll say, oh, well, of course, that's where your logo goes. And other times you're going to go, oh, I never thought that I could use a diagram that I created for this one thing. I could also use it here. That's the key here. Remember, it's wasteful to have these creative assets. These are raw materials. These are pieces of inventory that are not producing value for you all the time. You want to maximally use these things to create value for your organization, to not be wasteful. And you certainly don't want people to recreate them. Now, you can recreate them if you're tweaking them to refine them and to make them better. But I mean, sometimes people maybe draw a diagram, they recreate a flow chart, maybe they work on a theme for a particular area of marketing, and it's like, well, we already have themes that are created as part of our brand. Why aren't you using one of those themes already? You don't have to brainstorm from scratch for this. So that's very wasteful when people start from scratch. Oh, I missed one here. Screenshots and annotations. And that, you can see I was brainstorming and starting to get down to some pretty granular things that you think. But again, I'm thinking that when I have taken the time to grab a screen capture and to put some annotations on it, I'm communicating, I'm using that in some way to communicate with another stakeholder. And do I use it as a one-off, like I paste it in an email or I print it out on something? you want to think of all the various ways that you can use these assets. All right, now where can we repurpose these things? Some of these are very obvious, and most of them should seem obvious to you. And what I want you to do later, I might create a tool to help you to do this, but I'm not promising anything there. So if you see a link in the description, beyond just getting a PDF download of this, there may be another tool where you can use sort of an app to mix and match these things, and you sort of check off what of the assets. Remember, the previous screen was all about the categories of the creative assets, of the content. And now we're talking about where to repurpose them. And what I want you to do is cross-reference. I want you, as you look at these things, to think back to the first slide and think, okay, well, which of those creative assets could I use in these areas? So let's get started here. The first one I have on the screen is your website. That should be the first one that came to mind for everybody. So of course, your logo as a category of asset, of a creative asset, a type of content that you've taken the time to create. Your logo certainly belongs on your website. What other things maybe that you've taken the time to create? Your theme, your designs, they belong on your website, but where else may they belong? What about in your social media messages? So if you take the time to create a theme that matches your brand with colors and font and that kind of thing that goes on your website, wouldn't you want that to repurpose that same theme or that same design element to go into your social media messages and platform? Or do you have some sort of copy on your website, a nice message, maybe it's a quote that you're always saying, a slogan, and are you using that in your social media messages? So you're getting the idea here, and I won't stop for every one of these and elaborate quite as much, but I want you to understand the concept of repurposing this time and again, as many places as you can. With each of those creative assets, I want you to repurpose them in every one of these areas that you can, so that you are maximizing, you are optimally leveraging those assets to get return on the investment of the time and resources you put into them. Sometimes you spent money to pay a designer to create some of this stuff. You want to, use that again and again. All right, what about in your email campaigns or your newsletters? And another one I have up here are any blogs. So you've taken the time to write some copy on your website, and maybe there's a great quote or some sort of copy that you're using that goes into your blog. So think about all of the copy that is going into the various areas that you have. Something that's going into the website could also go into a blog and vice versa. Something that you wrote in a blog might be great copy to go on your website. Your video blogs or your vlogs are an area that you can repurpose some of this content. Of course, you can have your logo, as I do, on the vlog message, on the video, and we can use slogans in our vlogs. What about explainer videos that you have for your customers that you put on your website? Again, you're going to use your creative assets inside of those explainer videos, or in your instructional or educational videos, which could be for any stakeholder. It could be for your team members or your customers. What about your live streams and your video conferences? So you may have created something that is really good in one area that you're using, and you realize, I'm not using my logo as part of my backdrop in my video conferences. When I'm on my video conference, what of all those categories could you use in those areas? Or your webcasts, your podcasts. So I think we said earlier that you create some audio assets. So you are taking the time to create a vlog, a video log like this one. Well, could it be repurposed as a podcast, just as an audio form of content? Sales presentations. And remember, I want to just touch on this for a second here, is that your stakeholders really all want to hear the same message from you. In other words, your value proposition that you're trying to communicate, it's imperative to communicate that to all your stakeholders. Your business partners, of course, one another, you want to feed off of the enthusiasm of the great value you add to the marketplace, but certainly you want to share that with your customers as well. And any team members you have, any frontline staff, the people that operate your business is really good that they understand the same marketing messages, the same way that you communicate value. So you can understand that even though the stakeholders differ in how they have a stake in your business and how they interact with your business, what touch points they may engage in, the messages are very useful for everyone. That's why you need to repurpose this, and you need to think of how you might use something internally that you've been using exclusively externally, or vice versa. So your sales presentations is another one. I didn't want to skip over that one. Branded items. Think of all the branded items you do and you use in your business. Your invoices, your customer communiques and follow-up, some sort of form letters you might use, letterhead, your stationery, maybe you have branded pens and that kind of thing. The stuff we all get, the swag and corporate gifts that you may give away, all of these things can have that content that you've created, certainly your logo, but other things, a slogan, these types of things may go on that. And again, if you're taking the time to write some copy that is very useful in one form of communication, it may also be useful on an invoice or on a customer communique or some sort of follow-up. I said word tracks as an example. Well, if you're following up with customers, maybe you were going to use some of those word tracks that you wrote down. What about your search engine marketing ads? So these fall into a few different categories. There's text-based pay-per-click ads, and then there are visual or display networks. And typically you could use banners and that kind of stuff. Well, you can understand that if you've taken the time to create a hero banner for your website, maybe that theme and the design and everything, the whole message that's on there might make a great ad on the display network for some remarketing, some retargeting that'd be very recognizable for someone who's already been to your website. If you don't know what some of these things are that I'm referring to, remarketing, retargeting, you can certainly leave a comment and I'll reply to your comment in the video. You can reach out to us directly. We can help you with all this kind of stuff. Online reputation management. I mentioned that one of your assets is your stakeholder feedback. Well, certainly when you're getting customer feedback, that can certainly be used for online reputation management in terms of reviews, testimonials, and ratings. And where are the various places you put that? On your website? Would you use a quote from a very happy customer outside of your website? Or maybe on a third-party site that links to your services? Some of you are using that. What about in your social media messages? All these kinds of things can be repurposed. All right, where else? Internal communications, and here's some examples of those. In your newsletters, in your memos. So you're communicating internally with your team, and do you want to tell them, like, you've taken the time to put together a great sales presentation, and you're using various design elements and a really good, maybe some sort of audio, video, that kind of stuff. Can you insert multimedia messages in your newsletter, in your internal memos? What about in your standard operating procedures? If you've taken the time to put together a video, an instructional video on how to train somebody for internal message, it can go in a standard operating procedure that everyone can benefit from. For your onboarding, for your training, what else do we have here? For your social events, I've seen some great materials that are produced by a company and then used at, say, their Christmas party. Maybe something is running in the background, and it could be something that communicates a message of what a great place it is to work and this kind of thing. So your social events, meetings. There's one that comes to mind with many years that I spent working with an organization and my involvement with Toyota, and I'd go to, say, a convention with Toyota, and they would have produced these great digital assets or multimedia assets, almost like television commercials that they would play for us that would get us really excited about the product or whatever. They might even show a demonstration with one Toyota vehicle outperforming another vehicle, but they wouldn't repurpose those for their legal reasons and stuff like that. We would never have access to them. They would be very strict about making sure that we couldn't have it. And I thought to myself, wow, what a waste. You put so much into it. You could see the production quality of these digital assets, of these creative assets, I should say, but they were predominantly digital, and they could be repurposed. And that's another point to make here. Anytime these things are digital, the marginal cost of replication reproduction is next to nothing. So that's why it would be so much of a shame, so wasteful to take the time, invest the resources to create one of these things, like in my example at the Toyota meetings, and not use them as many areas as possible. Now, in their defense, they were worried about, maybe they didn't do it as scientifically as they should have, and they were worried about a lawsuit from somebody. You're probably not engaged in those types of things, and maybe the assets you're creating, you're not so worried about the legal ramifications of repurposing. But I thought that anecdote was really meaningful, and why it struck me as so important. If you're gonna spend the time on something, use it. And you may not think, hey, well, yeah, we can use this in our sales meeting. We created this for a customer. We can use this in our sales meeting. What about in your handbook or your mission statement, your values composition, whatever you use to communicate values, and your constitution, if you have one for your organization? Any sort of ways that you communicate your culture, of course, you can use these assets that you've taken the time to create. Talent acquisition and recruitment. I think of a video that was all about it. The video was created for an annual meeting with the organization, and in the video it had interviews and little snippets and sound bites from a whole variety of staff, and they were invariably talking about how much they enjoyed working there and everything. And I thought right away, well, that belongs in recruitment. That needs to be repurposed as part of any sort of talent acquisition efforts you were making. What about your facility, your decor, your promotional messages? So think about all the ways that around the office, so to speak, or around the workshop, wherever it is that you work in the facility, could you be taking those same things that you're communicating as inspirational messages to customers in your marketing, and could you use those in, posted on the wall somewhere that people would really enjoy? Also in your signage. So of course your logo would typically be on your sign, and maybe your color scheme and theme and the various things you use for that. All right, moving right along here. What else do we have up here? Where else can we repurpose these creative assets? What about public speaking engagement? I mean, some of you may actually, as part of your marketing initiatives, be involved in public speaking. You're an expert in your field, and you go out and you're invited by others, maybe in a virtual environment, maybe in an actual brick and mortar location of someplace in a conference or whatever, and you're speaking, and you've got these creative assets that you've, maybe backdrops, or as I said, demonstration materials. Maybe you've got little videos that you've been using around the office for one particular thing, and can you use that as part of those public speaking engagements? Grassroots events, trade shows, conventions, conferences, you're getting the idea here. In your traditional media as well, we don't deal that much with traditional media in our organization and with a lot of our clients, but some of you are using traditional media. And if you're taking the time to put together a television commercial, could you be using that as a pre-roll for your YouTube advertising, or vice versa? What about radio? We talked about the audio assets that you might have put together. Can you use those in the form of radio in some sort of marketing? Your print, and of course traditional media print can be anything from magazines to newspapers to local community guides, and also flyers, that kind of thing. Point of purchase, if you're putting together a backdrop that maybe you use in a video conference, could that be a point of purchase thing? Is there a diagram that you put together that would make an interesting point of purchase thing for the people who are attending your business to look at and go, and it helps to build value. Remember, that's what this is all about. Out of doors, whether it's billboard or benches, the bus benches, all sorts of out of doors, sometimes on hockey arenas and this kind of thing. They have that kind of stuff. So those are all the various things that I brainstormed going through this. And like I said, that what I want you to do, go ahead and download these the handout that I give for this, and then use those creative asset categories and then cross-reference them with all the various ways that you communicate with your stakeholders in marketing or whatever else, and ask yourself, which of these do I have? Which of these things have I already invested time, money, energy, resources into creating, and am I repurposing them as much as I otherwise could be. And find some ways. Your homework today is to make sure that you repurpose something that you've already created, a creative asset, some sort of content that's already in existence, and you're going to repurpose it for building value in your organization for one of your stakeholders. And hopefully it's your customer, but it can also be to build value with those internal stakeholders, the people that work for you and so on. So that's your homework today. I just wanted to, as I was brainstorming, this is a really important concept. Remember, anytime you are wasting something and you're reworking things, or your resources that you already own, they are dormant, they're not going to work for you. You are not working as smart as you can, and you are not going to get ahead like those who are working smarter, who are doing this. And I find myself repeating this message to clients and even internally when I see an asset and I say, oh, well, are we using this over in this area? And I won't repeat all the various examples I gave. So I think this should be really useful. Today's message, you should look back at it from time to time. Every time you engage in the creative process, or someone in your organization, every time you invest some of your company's resources to create something, I want you to go back to this list. And if we create some sort of application that you can use, then use that. But I want you to go back to it and then sort of check through, like a little check mark. Or could we use this in a company social event? Could we use this in a grassroots event? Could I use this as a public speaking engagement? What about this? We put together this model here to be able to communicate to our people a vision that we had. Should we use that model and show it to our customers? Could we use that as a point of purchase? I'm going through the examples. I said I wouldn't, but I want you to get the idea. I want you to do this. That is your homework, and I want you to do this recurring. Make sure you send this to your marketing personnel so that they know that, but also your human resources. You saw lots of human resource examples there of how you could use, say, marketing materials in your human resource to reinforce points and so on. That's where I wanted to leave it today. I hope you got something out of this. Leave a comment and let me know if you can think of some other areas. What are some other categories of creative assets that I left out? Or what are some areas that where could you repurpose these things? Have you been guilty in the past of not repurposing things? Is this useful to you? Or do you think it's maybe silly, some of the examples I gave that are a little bit superfluous and not realistic to be able to repurpose things? Or is there some impracticalities that I should have covered about repurposing things? Like maybe the aspect ratios and things like that do have to be reworked, but not starting from scratch. Anyway, give some pushback if you disagree. Give us positive reinforcement in the comments if you do agree. Whatever you do, by leaving a comment, people get to learn, and we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.